Asteriola are the fragments of God who came down to earth. The scriptures say that they are demigods whose calling is to fight evil. Asterials protect the world from fallen humans who have entered into a contract with evil. They steal people's feelings and wreak havoc. Amid war and discord, one legend shines brightly. This is a cute story told to young children. A cry was heard. It was a little girl crying. Mom asked another girl named Claire why did she bring Eziel to tears. Claire told her mother that she told Eziel she was a fool. The mother, with a harsh expression on her face, asked why she offended her so much. The girl explained that Eziel wanted to write another letter to the May Fairy, a letter saying that she wants another gift. A little girl with long brown hair and big purple eyes said to her mother. The girl's mother, who had golden hair and green eyes, asked what was wrong with that. Claire explained that there is no May Fairy, that all the presents are given to them by their mother. So she told Eziel about it, and she in turn said that she is a liar. The girl added that she even showed the letters that were in her mother's desk drawer, but her sister was still crying. Here a little girl ran up to the woman. She had the same golden hair and green eyes as her mother. With tears in her eyes, she asked her mother if it was true that the May Fairy does not exist. There was a pause. The mother did not know what to answer. Claire stood in silence while Eziel kept whimpering. The woman sighed heavily and asked, holding her head, "Why does she alone have such twins, who are as different from each other as day and night?" The woman asked Eziel not to cry, but the girl still could not calm down. Claire calmly watched this picture from the side. Then the girl also sighed heavily and decided to let everything be her way as usual. Claire apologized to Eziel and said she lied to her. The girl said that their mother was not the May Fairy. Eziel then took Claire's hand and said with a charming smile that she also apologized to Claire and offered to reconcile. Claire smiled back and commented that Eziel had a very nice smile. Eziel then turned to her mother and said that she and Claire would play outside some more. Mother allowed them. When the girls ran outside, the maid asked them not to play until late. Eziel replied that they understood and would play not far away. For now, she is not a guilty child, but one day she will become an adult. These are the thoughts with which Claire followed her sister. It was a wonderful sunny spring day. The girls were playing on the hill near the village. Eziel plucked flowers and, after gathering a bouquet with a happy expression on her face, said that she would weave a wreath for her mother. Looking at her sister's happy look, Claire asked her to do the same for her. Eziel agreed. While Eziel was engaged in weaving, Claire watched her sister with an indifferent expression. She looked around with the thought that she was very bored. The girl looked at the village, which was visible from the hill on which they were playing. She wondered why all the children believed in the May Fairy. Why only little ones believe in the existence of a good fairy? Are they ready to close their eyes to the truth for the sake of some gifts? Claire was in disbelief when she first heard about the May Fairy. Unlike her twin Eziel and any other child, among the children she was a white crow. Most of the children were sad without a father, but not everyone understood that constant moving meant that their family was on the run. The mother constantly repeated that when they grow up, they will understand everything. And Claire thought that most children hardly know how to do something like that, and putting her hand forward, powerful streams of wind began to burst out of her palms. She directed them towards Eziel. They wrapped around her sister, raising her hair up, and the little girl laughed and said that she was tickled. Due to such a strong wind, the flowers that Eziel was holding in her hands flew across the sky. The girl noted that the flowers had scattered. Eziel then asked Claire to put the flowers back. Claire looked up and agreed. Having concentrated the currents of wind around her, the girl directed them upwards and, controlling them, began to gather flowers together. Eziel was delighted. She was laughing and happy as she circled among the flowers and said that Claire was cool and that it was very nice. After finishing, Claire collapsed onto the grass carpet. Eziel thanked her sister for collecting the flowers. Claire said no thanks. Lying on the grass among the flowers, Claire thought about enjoying the peace before they had to leave again. Was she worried about why she wasn't like everyone else? And if someone appeared who could explain to her why so? Claire is tired of running around the villages. She was tired, and it was very boring and strange. Maybe if they moved to the city, she would be able to meet kids like her. Raising her finger up, Claire released a small stream of wind that swirled around her finger. She wondered if there was anyone in the world who could explain why she was the way she was. Suddenly, Claire noticed something. She jumped up from the ground, and Eziel only asked her sister to see what wreath she had already woven. The girl did not notice how 5 dark adult figures appeared behind her. Claire just managed to shout her sister's name. Esiel turned around and asked with surprise who they were. Claire froze. She realized that someone had also appeared behind her. Turning her head, she looked up and saw the figure of a man in a uniform and cloak. A tall and slender man was looking straight into her eyes. Suddenly he dropped to one knee beside Claire. The girl was a little scared. Claire decided that she would drive him away with her power. As soon as she began to concentrate the currents of wind in her hands, suddenly everything disappeared. The girl looked at her hands and could not understand what was happening. Where did her wind go? Here she heard a man's voice, who pointed out with interest that she already knew how to use the force. Claire raised her surprised eyes at him. The girl was able to get a better look at the man. He had a pleasant face, silver hair, and purple eyes. Claire thought he looked a lot like her. Piercing purple eyes, a cold and detached gaze, fair skin like freshly fallen snow. The girl looked at the young man and said that he looked like her. She thought to herself that this was the Duke of Celsius, the hero of the Empire. Claire was able to get a good look at him, and they were exactly the same. Looking at him, Claire noticed that the only difference between them was that he was a grown man and she was a girl. Also, that they are still different in height and configuration, but they are still so similar. And then Claire came to her senses. Never having to think, she rushed towards Esiel, who was sitting on the ground behind her. The girl grabbed her sister's hand and, covering it with herself, shouted not to approach them. The man rose from his knees and silently looked at the girls. Then he came closer and knelt closer to the sisters. Claire was determined to protect her sister and closed Esiel even more. The man leaned over to them and said that they must be twins. He asked if they were Claire and Esiel. Claire said yes and asked why he would. Esiel peeked out from behind her sister and looked at the man standing in front of them. He also noticed that she was looking at him. The man smiled sweetly at Esiel. She looked at him in silence for a few seconds, and then she was happy and smiled widely. Out from behind Claire and introduced herself as Esiel, and she asked her husband what his name was. The man introduced himself as Arcel Constantine de Sadios. Esiel was surprised at what a complicated name it was. Rising from the ground, Claire noted the name Arcel about herself. Such was the tradition in the Empire. The father gave his name to his daughter, who looked like her mother, and the daughter, who looks like him, was given the mother's name. The girl understood that Esiel and Arcel are similar names in origin. Claire asked with a stern expression what he needed, and then I heard someone calling the girls by name. It was their mother running up the hill and calling her sisters. The man rose from his knees and Esiel turned and said with a smile that it was their mother. Having climbed the hills, the woman, shaking off her dress and choking, said that it was time for dinner, so they should go. The man addressed her by name, Carlotta. The woman looked up. He was standing in front of her in a uniform and cloak. The man said that they finally met. Claire noticed that her mother had a sad expression on her face and pursed her lips. Clinging to Claire, the woman replied that she did not think she would ever see him again. The man said that he did not know that she had given birth to his daughter. Carlotta replied that they were her daughters and that they were better off without him. Claire, watching her mother, understood something, that it was unbearable for her to live with this man. Taking her daughter in her arms, the woman turned her back to her husband and asked why he had come, that she had not seen him for ages. The man ran around and standing in front of her said that now things will not be as easy for her as before. Carlotta sarcastically asked if his lordship the Duke of Celsius had only come to make her life more difficult. The Duke also asked whether a man had no right to see his wife. Claire, listening to this, wondered how they could have children at all. The woman also sarcastically replied that she had already forgotten that they were married and offered him a divorce. Claire noted that they had just met, and her mother was already talking about divorce. With a serious expression on his face, the Duke said that it was unacceptable that she was almost executed. He turned his eyes to Claire, who was looking at him very intently. The man did not go into details in front of the child, but only asked Carlotta if she remembered. Claire noted for herself that they wanted to execute her mother, and what had she done to deserve such a punishment? She was surprised that at the first words the parents started cursing, but now the Duke showed concern. Esiel cried out with tears in her eyes that she was very scared. The parents were startled. The Duke stretched out his hand and wanted to say something, but Carlotta was the first to embrace her daughter and told her not to be afraid, that they would not talk about the terrible thing again. The mother gently told Esiel to hug her mother and not be afraid. Arcel watched this scene and his expression changed. Claire noticed this and wondered why he had that expression on his face. as if he regretted something very much. The girls suggested that maybe he regretted that his pregnant mother was forced to run away because of him. Is it because they are fighting now? And maybe he regretted that he had not gone in search of them earlier. Claire didn't know what was wrong with him, but she could see the bitter regret in his eyes. Carlotta, holding Esiel in her arms, said that if she could only survive as the Duchess of Celsius, then let him tell everyone that she died. Let him say that a depraved person of royal blood could not survive outside the walls of the imperial palace. And Carlotta added, if he said it, everyone would believe him. Looking into the Duke's eyes, she said that she would continue to raise children and remain unknown for the rest of her days. Carlotta also said that he lived and did not long until he found out that he had children, so keep living like that. Claire continued to stare at Duke Archelaus. She had heard about him from her mother's stories, that he was a very famous person in the empire. Archelaus Constantine de Sandos, Duke of Celsus, a close friend of the current emperor and an asterial of justice. He married the daughter of the former emperor and played a key role in his overthrow. Mother Claire was the daughter of the former emperor. The girl heard many stories about it, and all of them were not good at all. The previous emperor, her maternal grandfather, was an evil tyrant. He killed his sister, who rightfully belonged to the throne. His reign was full of tears and blood. Having overthrown the tyrant, Duke Celsius restored justice and brought the true heir to power. Claire grabbed her mother's skirt. She thought that if her mother was the daughter of the former emperor, they would all be executed if they found out where they were. Duke Arcel approached the woman and asked if she really thought he had lived well. Touching the tips of his fingers to her sleeve, he said that she knew perfectly well that he did not live, but existed without her. Stepping back a little, Arcel noticed that it was getting dark soon and the girls were probably tired. He asked permission to take them to a safe place. Just about to object when Esiel, who was sitting on her arms, turned around and exclaimed with delight, "What a beauty!" The girl's eyes lit up. She saw a beautiful and elegant carriage on the road. Esiel whispered in her mother's ear if they could ride in that carriage. The mother said that it seems they have no choice. Esiel was very happy, and Claire wondered if this was her punishment for complaining about her boring life. She began to worry that events were unfolding too quickly. Esiel grabbed her sister's hand and asked her to leave. Claire asked where, and Esiel, with a happy smile and delight in her eyes, asked to go with her in that beautiful carriage. Claire wondered if her sister understood where this carriage was taking her. Esiel pulled Claire with her toward the carriage. The mother of the girls, watching such a picture, only sighed heavily and asked in her voice who it was. Looking confused, Carlotta reached for her temple. How suddenly Duke Arcel appeared before her again. He gently took Carlotta's hand and said that it was definitely not his. Claire noted this gesture for herself. The girl knew that when her mother is stressed or very embarrassed, she rubs her temples. Every time Claire saw her mother raise her hand to her temples, it meant that she would soon be moving again. So, she thought, and this man took his mother's hand in his, when she again reached for her temples as if he knew about her habit. It suddenly dawned on Claire why her mother had married him. Meanwhile, the girls were already standing by the carriage, and the servant opened the door and invited them inside. Looking inside, Esiel noticed that everything inside the carriage was also very nice. Her admiration only grew. She wanted to climb into the carriage, but she could not. Esiel took a closer look and said that the step was too high. Duke Arcel approached them and offered his help to the two little ladies, holding out his hand. The girls were amazed and charmed after the words about the lady. The Duke took Esiel in his arms and placed her in the carriage. The girl was surprised how quickly and easily he carried her. Claire was getting nervous. She thought that maybe she should have said that she was herself. How suddenly she was picked up, and in a second she was already sitting next to her sister. Esiel was always happy and paid attention to the sisters who were inside the soft pillows. The Duke leaned over to Claire and, shaking her dress, noted that her clothes were slightly soiled. Leaving the girls in the carriage, Arcel said that he and their mother would come over now, so he asked them to wait. Claire at that moment managed to notice the ring on his ring finger. The girl looked closely and realized that it was a ring. It was decorated with a small blue stone, which shown Claire kept asking herself how it was possible that she and her mother got married. How long had he been looking for his runaway wife, looking at his engagement ring over and over every day? What was he thinking? Claire didn't understand anything. She saw through the window how the Duke was giving her mother's hand. The girl could not imagine that this man had a good relationship with her mother. Everyone got into the carriage. Esiel was just as happy about such a small adventure. Claire, on the other hand, was staring intently at her mother. She hoped that she would notice that Arcel was still wearing the ring. Carlotta, getting into the carriage with a displeased expression on her face, asked where he was taking them. The Duke replied that he had found a safe place not far from here. As soon as the Duke turned around, he said, "Let's go," as Esiel suddenly called him. She handed him a small white flower and said with a beaming smile that it was for him. Arcel was perplexed. He asked why she was giving him a flower, and Esiel replied that it was thanks for the fact that he would give them a ride in his carriage. Then she began to tell that it was a rosehip, her most favorite flower in the whole white world, that it blooms only in May and means longing for family. The Duke was very surprised by such a gift and the meaning of the flower. A happy smile appeared on his face. The mother grabbed Esiel and, putting her in her seat, said that it was enough to chat and it was time to go. Carlotta ordered the Duke to close the door. He obeyed with the words, "Yes, Your Highness." Claire looked after Arcel. She noticed with what a tender smile he sniffed the gifted flower. She thought he was quite a good man. She wondered why their mother said it was better for them not to know him. Esiel did not calm down. She told her sister that she was happy to ride in this carriage for days. The mother asked her daughter to sit quietly, otherwise she might fall. Esiel agreed. Claire looked at her mother, who was calmly sitting opposite her, and noted that she seemed to be used to riding in such a carriage. The mother asked the girl what she was thinking about. Claire replied that nothing like that. Wondered. Perhaps she wanted to ask her something. Claire turned to the window and said that everything was fine and not to worry. The woman was upset but did not insist. She began to rub her hands together nervously. Mother Claire added that if there was anything she wanted to know, she could not be shy about asking. Claire didn't ask her mother because she didn't have questions. On the contrary, she had many questions, but she did not think that her mother would be able to answer them directly. The girl noted that although the chairs were comfortable and soft, she still felt uncomfortable. Meanwhile, the carriage continued to drive. Night came. The girls and their mother fell asleep in the carriage. Esiel fell asleep on Claire's shoulder. When suddenly the horses neighed and the carriage stopped, Claire woke up. Duke Arcel opened the carriage door. He reported that they had already arrived. The girl's sleepy mother woke up and asked him to help Claire down first. The Duke carefully took the sleepy Claire in his arms, called her by name and asked her to wake up. Once on the street, the girl wiped her eyes and noted that the Duke had very rough hands. It was obvious that he had never had children. He was clumsy. As the Duke helped her mother and sister out of the carriage, Claire looked up and was startled by what she saw. In front of her was a huge estate illuminated by bright lanterns in the middle of a blooming garden. All the servants lined up on the driveway to greet them. Then her mother appeared from behind Claire, holding a sleeping Esiel in her arms. She passed by the girl in silence, and with a completely calm expression on her face, she confidently walked down the driveway to the estate. All her servants bowed low. Claire was amazed. She now understood that her mother had once been a part of this world. The girl saw the real her for the first time. Suddenly, Claire was picked up. It was the Duke. He took the girl in his arms and also went with her to the estate. Catching up with Carlotta, Arcel asked if Her Majesty liked the estate. The woman replied that she really likes it, that you have to be out of your mind not to like such an estate. And then she added that the only person she doesn't like here is him. The Duke only said that the estate was old, but he was glad that the princess liked it. Carlotta angrily asked if he was doing it on purpose, because he knows very well how she doesn't like being called that. As the maids opened the manor door for them, the girl's mother asked the Duke to stop calling her that, as she had lost her title after her father's fall. Herzog said that was not true. Claire was surprised and wondered what he meant. Archelaus said she was the granddaughter of Risila III, nephew of the current emperor. Also, she is of royal blood, that the fall of the former emperor did not affect her. Entering the estate, Carlotta stopped for a second. She suggested that the Duke put the girls to bed and talk first. Arcel said that his name was removed from the list of founders of the empire, that this is the payment for her pardon by the emperor. The girl's mother was shocked. She turned sharply to her husband and asked if he had lost his mind. She didn't ask him for it. Arcel replied that she did not ask, and he himself decided so. The maids who were nearby began to feel embarrassed that they were present at the quarrel of the Duke's spouses. Carlotta exclaimed how dare he deny her, and then she saw Claire sitting on Arcel's arms looking at her. The mother calmed down and in a calm voice asked Claire to take Esiel to the room, so that they go to bed and she will come soon, Claire thought, and then asked her mother to promise her that she wouldn't say words she would regret later. Then she would go to sleep. Carlotta was surprised by the girl's request. Claire explained that for as long as she can remember, she always thought there was something wrong with her. She wondered why she was not like all the children, and not even like her twin Esiel. Claire then reached out and released a stream of wind that shot up and then enveloped her and Duke Arshil. The gust of wind was so strong that it even lifted the curtains, and the maids had to hold on to their dresses. Claire closed the wind in her fist and it stopped. The girl said that she did not tell her mother about it. The mother continued to look at her, holding Esiel in her arms, and Claire added that it was because she knew it wasn't normal, and she did not want her mother to suffer even more because of her. The girl knew that her mother was always self-confident and sometimes even selfish, but she always worried a lot and was in pain. Claire was sure that she was the cause of her pain. When Esiel was just learning her first words, Claire was already able to speak in coherent sentences. And when she grew up, she stopped feeling not only a child, but even just a person. The girl was sure that it broke her mother's heart. A single mother of 2 children who was constantly on the run, but these were still flowers compared to the fact that one of her daughters was born without feelings. One summer day in their country house, Mother was consulting in the kitchen with the nanny. Once a woman asked how it is possible that a child has no emotions at all. She reminded her mother that there was a place for children like her in the temple, and perhaps it would be better if the girl was admitted there. Mother Claire was furious. She got so angry that at the same moment she kicked the woman out of the house so that things flew after her. Claire saw her mother throw the woman out of the house. She believed that her mother was always crying because of her. Therefore, she did not understand why the mother was so angry with the nanny. At that moment, someone took Claire's hand. She looked up and saw Esiel. Claire thought she and her sister were as different as night and day. She did not understand why her sister always wanted to be next to her and share everything with her. It was love. Her mother and sister loved her very much, and thanks to them, she gradually learned to feel other people and sympathize with them. Claire didn't want her mother to be sad because of her. She had shed enough tears because of her guilt. Carlotta looked at Claire, who was still sitting in Arcel's arms. The girl said that she does not like it when her mother is sad, but she saw that her mother might say something now, which she would regret later. Claire then asked if she could ask her mother something. The mother agreed, but asked Claire to wait a little. She wants to invest Esiel first and then they can talk. Carlotta went to the bedroom with Esiel. They were accompanied by maids. Claire had completely forgotten that she was in the Duke's arms. She felt embarrassed. What a shame, Claire thought. Asteriola are judges from heaven. They follow the fulfillment of the laws of their heavenly God, so that his laws are fulfilled both on earth and in heaven. So it was said in the Holy Scriptures. Asteriols are demigods sent from heaven to save humanity. They are fragments of the heavenly God that have fallen to earth. Each Asteriol has a unique ability. They remained to live on earth even after peace had come. They are the embodiment of sacred divine powers and God's love for humanity. Claire thought that the living Asteriols, their contemporaries, were a little different from what was said about them in the scriptures. The girl was sitting at the table with her mother and the Duke. The servant served them tea, sandwiches, cakes, and other treats. Claire looked at the cakes and asked if they could be made for Esiel tomorrow morning when she wakes up. Duke Arcel turned his head and glared at Claire. He smiled and nodded his head approvingly. The girl looked at him and asked about herself, "Is he a demigod?" From the outside it was not similar. She emphasized that he has a very human smile. The butler who served the tea bowed and wished a pleasant tea and left. Claire stayed alone in the room with her parents. Mother Claire was silent at first, and then turned to her daughter and asked if she wanted to eat. Claire replied that not now, that she would have breakfast with Esiel. Mother asked why in the morning. The Duke explained that it was because he had promised her that exactly the same sweets would be prepared for Esiel tomorrow. With a sullen expression on her face, Carlotta said she understood, and looking away from the Duke, she began to drink her tea. Then, putting her cup down, she said she had something to tell Claire. Carlotta told Claire not to think there was anything wrong with her. It's true that she was different from Esiel, but that doesn't mean she's bad. Mother frowned a little and said that Claire was just a little different. That's all. And Esiel, she is an ordinary child. Claire looked at her mother and noted that Esiel looked a lot like her. She had not seen her mother make such an expression for a long time. Claire then asked directly if she was an Asterial. The girl assumed that Asiel looked like her mother, and she looked like her father, and he was an Asterial. And her abilities are not like those of priests or magicians. The mother was silent for a while and then nodded her head. Then the Duke turned to Claire. He said she must have had difficulty feeling and understanding other people, getting close to them, right? He snapped his fingers and everything on the table disappeared in an instant. The Duke went on to say that Claire had special powers and he snapped his fingers again. All the dishes and sweets returned to the table. Claire didn't know if it was reality or a dream. To make sure that this is reality, she took and tried the cake that was on the table. It tasted the same. With a serious expression on his face, the Duke told the girl to remember that she must not approach the Emperor and his palace. You can't use your abilities on people without a good reason. That her abilities are given only in order to use them within the framework of human laws. The girl's mother got angry. She said that she knew that he would turn out to be a useless father. After all, he is seeing his daughter for the first time, and this is the first thing he decided to teach her. Arcel explained that the real Asterials are not what the scriptures say about them. Formally, they follow the laws. However, they have received titles and have been accumulating wealth for generations, which is due to those laws. Claire asked if that was all. The Duke reiterated that Asterials were not what the scriptures said, but she needed to understand something. The girl's mother was silent. She looked down at her tea and sighed. Claire looked at her and understood that her mother was upset. It meant that he was saying something bad now. The girl thought maybe there are difficulties in the life of the Asterials, which are not mentioned in the scriptures. She doesn't know that. The Duke looked at Claire, who was puzzled. He asked Carlotta that she knew her children could be Asterials, so why didn't she tell the girl about Ter? Carlotta was embarrassed. Claire looked at the Duke and asked what it was. Carlotta sighed loudly. She explained that the Terra mentioned in the scriptures is the devil who tempted the first Asterial and led him astray. This is how Asterials became mortal for the first time. She continued that Asterilla was the name of their first demigoddess. Terras are the former Asterials. The scriptures said that Terra was the first demon created to seduce the Asterials. When Terra succeeded in seducing Asteriola, Asteriola lost all but one of her abilities, and her body became mortal. Since then, the way to heaven has been closed to the Astrials. Claire was puzzled by this story. She asked her mother why she was telling her all this. The girl's mother suddenly blushed. Claire didn't understand why she was behaving so strangely. The Duke turned to his wife with a sly smile and suggested that she herself tell the girl everything. Claire looked at her embarrassed mother, who was very pale, and the Duke added, because she herself is a Ter. There was silence at the table. The Duke was smiling. All Claire could manage was an ouch. Carlotta became completely like a beet and covered her face with her hands. The girl saw how her mother was not comfortable. She didn't want to embarrass her. Claire thought that the mother was not yet ready to talk about this topic. Then Claire noticed how her father was smiling. He also had a slight blush on his face. The Duke noticed that Claire was looking at him and he smiled sweetly at her. And then the girl understood that's what the Tars did with the Asterials. Asterials were not sociable and had no feelings for other people, and Tars awakened these emotions in them, affecting their very essence. Asterial could even feel the love for his daughter that he had never seen before. This is what Ter with Asterials do. Claire felt uneasy. If love had such an effect on Asterial, then meeting Terra is a disaster for him. It is a raging storm that destroys flawless perfection. The girl was embarrassed. She tried to understand how this was possible, and was afraid that this could happen to her. Herzog said that Tars are not highly revered in writing, but Tars are mortal. Mortals in which they are Asterials can fall in love. The girl's mother was confused. She didn't know what to say. Then she turned to Claire and took her hand. The girl asked if she would also have a container and where to find it. Herzog said she may or may not meet him, that she will have a lot of choices throughout her life, that there can be a container for every Asteriola. He added that the girl will definitely know that it is hers when she meets him, that she will understand that she is looking into the eyes in which her whole world is. Having said that, Arcel looked at her mother. They looked at each other for a moment. Claire looked at her mother and noted that she had a look like she wanted to hit him. The girl's mother turned to her and smiled. She told her that it didn't matter if she found her match or not. She was a smart girl and she would figure it all out. Taking Claire by the hand, the mother said that she knew that she could not worry about her. Claire was embarrassed by such words. She knew that her mother was pregnant when she ran away from the Duke of Celsius. She admitted that she would meet her target and be head over heels in love with him. But what about him? She will idolize a guy she doesn't really know. And what if this love is not mutual? How can she bear the pain that his disgust will cause her? Claire then asked the parents how they could talk about it so easily. The Duke looked at Claire with a smile and explained that it was better to endure Tara's hatred if only she was around. After all, it is absolutely impossible to live without it. And then, slyly looking at her mother, he added that at the same time you arrive in a light obsession. This made Claire even more despondent. She saw that her father was not slightly but absolutely obsessed with her mother. It was as if he did not look like himself. The girl completely lost her spirit when she realized that she would become the same as him when she grew up. Mother Claire jumped up and started shouting at the Duke that he was crazy. How can he say such things to a child? She asked him to follow his words. The Duke, with a calm expression on his face, said that everything was correct and reminded her that she herself needed to be an example of what she was teaching her. Matinka stopped and thought about the Duke's words. Then she sat down on the chair next to Claire and told her to forget the nonsense. The mother added that the girl's mother will love her. She emphasized that Claire is a very beautiful and intelligent girl, so who could not like her? At such an important and sweet moment, the Duke said that she would be surprised, but even such people would be found. Carlotta remained silent, but a vein of anger appeared on her face. Claire seems to be beginning to understand why her mother ran away. Matinka sighed. She suddenly put Claire in her arms and hugged her. With a stern expression on her face, she hissed for the Duke to apologize immediately. Claire thought she now understood why her father was so strange. The Duke calmly got up from his chair and apologized to Claire. There was silence in the room again. The Duke then led Claire and her mother to their chambers. At the door of their room, he wished them good night. He turned around and left. Claire and her mother looked after him. Suddenly, Carlotta, putting her hand to her head, sighed loudly. She called out to the Duke and asked him to wait. The Duke turned around in surprise and froze. Claire was amazed. Her mother approached the Duke and took him by the tufts of his camisole. Holding tightly to her camisole, Carlotta told Arcel that she would only do it once, so he had to listen carefully. She said that she has no hatred towards him. The Duke was amazed. He did not understand what she was leading to. Carlotta said she used to think she hated him. In general, she did not like him, as did everyone around her. And she also hated everyone in the temple. But most of all, she was annoyed by the regularity with which he came to see her, although it always ended in a quarrel. But after she ran away and started raising children, she had time to think. The point was that she didn't hate him at all. She hated him, who was constantly rushing to her aid and worried about her safety. Arcel was very surprised. He said he didn't understand her. Claire continued to watch her parents. She began to worry about her mother. Carlotta said no one believed she was a virgin except him. She was an ordinary mortal woman who constantly argued with him. And in front of her, he, the mighty Asteriolus, begged on his knees. She hated those who laughed at him. But she couldn't admit that she was empty. That's why she behaved like that. And he did not give up. He did not give up on her after all the scandals she caused. Perhaps precisely because of this, she will be able to believe that she is his package. Looking into Arcel's eyes, Carlotta apologized for not apologizing to him when they first met. Carlotta said that she is his container, and she apologized once again for denying it for so long. She added that she was afraid he would leave her, so she left him alone, and once again apologized. Then Carlotta pulled the Duke closer and said in his ear that she had promised herself that she would definitely tell him all this if they met again. And she repeated that she has no hatred for him. Most likely, she even loves him. Then she let the Duke go. Looking at him, she approached Claire. The Duke was silent. Carlotta took her daughter's hand and they went to their room. Claire looked at her mother and noted that she had an expression on her face as if she had calmed down. The girl turned and looked at the Duke. He was as if in prostration and continued to stand in the corridor. He had such a surprised expression on his face, like a believer who has received a revelation from his God. The morning has come. Esiel was the first to wake up. After wiping her eyes, she noticed how soft the bed was. Touching her clothes, she said, "What a nice nightgown." And then, looking around, Esiel was surprised to find herself lying on a huge bed with her sister and mother in a luxurious room. With that, she woke Claire up. She asked what the matter was. Esiel told her sister that a white uncle came to them yesterday. She asked if he was an angel, and they died and went to heaven. Claire was sleepily trying to understand what Esiel was saying. And the girl added that yesterday she thought that Uncle looked a lot like Claire, and she thought that the May Fairy had granted her wish and given them back their father. Sonna Claire looked at her sister. She remembered that it was true. Aziel had asked the May Fairy to bring her father home, and since she really looked like him, Aziel's questions were not without reason. Claire wondered if Aziel really thought the May Fairy had sent him. Then Aziel turned to her sister and asked, "Suddenly their father is an angel." Claire asked what she was talking about. Aziel continued that maybe he became an angel and lost his memory, and then remembered them and decided to take them to heaven with him. Claire thought to herself that this was a heavy theory and illogical. Claire asked Aziel to be quieter. After all, their mother was still sleeping. The girl calmed down. Here the maids entered the room. They wished Lady Claire and Lady Aziel good morning and said they would help them dress. Hearing this, Aziel lit up with joy. Claire thought that now she had no chance of convincing her sister that this was not paradise. Having changed their clothes, the maids took the sisters to the courtyard of the estate. Claire asked her sister if she really thought they were in heaven now. Aziel replied that she really likes it here. Claire thought for a moment, then asked Aziel if she knew that heaven was only entered after death. Does she think they're all dead? Claire added that she believed they were quite alive. Aziel thought about her sister's words. She examined herself and replied that her sister was right, and she also felt alive. Claire was not surprised by such an answer. She only thought to herself that it must be so, because she is alive. The girl began to get annoyed and said that if they were alive, it was not heaven, and asked if Aziel understood that now. Aziel froze for a moment, considering Claire's words. Then she turned and looked at the estate, then at the maids accompanying them, and turning back to Claire said that she realized that it really didn't seem like heaven. Claire sighed heavily. She thought to herself that one delusion less. Now she only had to convince her sister that the Duke of Selsilski was not an angel at all. And then suddenly Claire was jerked very hard. It was Aziel who grabbed her hand and pulled her once very quickly. When they stopped, Claire was able to peek out from behind her sister and see what was there. She saw Duke Arkell ahead of her, which Aziel was already calling with a smile. Claire decided she was giving up. Coming closer, Aziel greeted the Duke, who was accompanied by a man. Claire thought it was a good thing her sister hadn't called him an angel. However, she became interested in what kind of young man was next to the Duke. Aziel looked at the strange man and thought about something. She looked worried. Then the young man stepped forward and after wishing Lady Claire and Aziel good morning, bowed. The guy introduced himself as the butler of the Duke of Silsey, Baronet Louis Reason, at their service. Looking at his sisters, he smiled and added that he had been serving the Duke since he was young. Claire noticed that this guy noticed that Aziel was afraid. She also noticed that the guy is smart and also handsome. Women probably like him. Here Aziel took Arcel by the sleeve and asked if he was a duke. Watching this scene, Claire thought that because of the way Baronet Resena had introduced herself, Aziel had finally realized that their father was not an angel, but a duke. Aziel and the Duke stared at each other for several seconds. Then Arcel nodded to her. Seeing her sister's reaction, Claire breathed a sigh of relief. And then the Duke knelt before the sisters. Leaning over to Aziel, he fixed the bow on her hair. Then he turned to Claire and adjusted the sleeve of her dress. He looked very tenderly at the sisters, and the girls were amazed by his care. When he finished, the sisters were beaming like princesses, and their faces were embarrassed. Then Aziel whispered to her sister that Claire looked a lot like Mr. Duke, that he has shiny hair. Aziel added that Claire had the same hair until her mother dyed it. After these words, the Duke turned his gaze to Claire. She explained that her mummy had brewed a potion for her hair because everyone noticed her eye color anyway, and with her silver hair she attracted too much attention. The Duke said with a smile that Carlotta really knows how to cook potions. If she had enough mana to brew a potion while they were on the run, then surely they had enough money to live on. Claire nodded her head, and Aziel kept her eyes on the Duke. Then the girl turned to the Duke and said that since yesterday she wanted to ask him something. The Duke smiled at her and asked what exactly. Aziel said she and her twin sister celebrated their 9th birthday in February, and picking her fingers, Aziel asked the Duke, "Is he their dad?" The Duke smiled and nodded his head. Aziel screamed. She came up and hugged the Duke. Claire watched them from the sidelines. The Duke looked at her and offered to join them. Claire hesitated for a second, but then looked at Aziel's happy expression and slowly approached the Duke. He reached out and grabbed her by the waist as well and pulled her close. For Claire, she noted that the Duke was very warm. Aziel smiled and happily told Claire to hug together, and the Duke hugged the two sisters very, very tightly. Dvoretsky, watching such a picture, happily smiled. Claire wondered if they would be laughed at for hugging like that, but she tried to explain something to herself that they were so close to each other. Then the girls were led to a table that had been prepared on the terrace and covered with various sweets and tea. Aziel was delighted with such diversity and beauty. Claire said she could eat. The girls saw through the window that her parents were sitting at the table in the estate. Her mother, setting down a cup of tea, told the Duke to tell. The Duke looked at her and asked what exactly. Carlotta looked at him sternly and repeated that he should talk already and not pretend that he did not understand what she was talking about. Claire realized that Aziel couldn't hear their conversation, but she did. Therefore, she decided to pretend that she did not hear anything. The mother said he had granted her a pardon in exchange for his name being removed from the list of founders of the empire. What does it mean? The Duke calmly replied that this was exactly what he had said. The Duke explained that there was a list of the founders of the new empire, those who helped the new emperor come to power. Claire understood that he meant a coup, when people depose a tyrant and put a new ruler in his place. Until yesterday, it had nothing to do with Claire. But now it is the defining thing in her life. When the tyrant was overthrown and her mother's cousin took the throne, it turned her whole life upside down. The previous emperor killed his sister, who was rightfully the empress. He also wanted to kill her son, the crown prince. The prince's life was in danger, and he barely survived with the help of his loyal subjects, and in the end, he became the emperor. Carlotta noted that the Duke had not negotiated anything. She asked to explain that she was not only pardoned, but also left with the title of Duchess. She is the emperor's cousin. It is impossible. She was sure there was some catch here. With a calm expression on his face, the Duke, looking at Carlotta, replied that he had awakened Fermata and swore to her that Carlotta was his. Claire was shocked to hear. She even spilled the tea. Fermata got stuck in her head. Mother was also shocked. She asked the Duke if he had really done that. Had he really awakened the same Fermata? The Duke still calmly asked if there were others. Carlotta was amazed. She said he was crazy and how could he wake up such a creature? While Aziel was carelessly enjoying the cakes. Claire thought she agreed with her mother on that. Fermata is a phoenix who took promises from people. He uses the energy of a sincere vow to create a new heart for himself. And when he comes to life, he serves the one who swore. He gets at his disposal the power of Fermata. But if suddenly a person breaks his promise, Fermata's fiery wrath will burn him and everything he owns to the ground. Claire remembered that once upon a time there was a king who broke his promise to the farm. Not only he himself, but also his entire kingdom was burned. The priests were forced to put Fermata to sleep. They promised that she would never be allowed to see people again, and since then no one has heard anything about Fermata. The Duke explained that he wanted the whole world to know that she was his. Carlotta had a worried expression on her face. She said he said it as if nothing bad had happened and added that he had lost his mind. Herzog said that Fermata is only dangerous when you deceive it, didn't it? And his promise is an unbreakable truth. Therefore, he has nothing to fear. The girl's mother grabbed his head and answered that that's why she thinks he's lost his mind. She said he knew why no one believed she was his, because she and her father bewitched him. Carlotta said that she had practiced magic all her life and still did not know what the spell was. Herzog said he would explain briefly. That spell was not Asterial's bewitchment to Terra, whom he does not love. Suddenly, Aziel interrupted Claire's eavesdropping. She asked if there would be a cake. Claire asked her sister if she wanted to eat it. Aziel said she was already full, but the cake looked so delicious that she asked Claire to eat it and tell her how it tasted. Claire decided to do as her sister said, and she secretly continued to observe what was happening in the estate. Claire saw the horrified look on her mother's face, and she began to tremble. Carlotta asked what kind of magic it was then, what kind of spell. The Duke told her not to be afraid. Claire chewed the cake with an indifferent face and continued to listen to her parents' conversation. Aziel asked what the cake tasted like. Claire replied that it was creamy with lemon, sweet, and citrusy. Aziel was happy to note that it was very tasty. The Duke approached Carlotta and, sitting next to her, put his hand on her shoulder. The woman repelled this hand and asked what kind of spell it was. He replied that it was a spell that made the Asteriola serve his emperor for life. Carlotta was surprised. Claire's face was no less surprised. Aziel also noticed that her sister's expression had changed. Claire invited her sister to try another cake. Aziel, forgetting that she wanted to ask something, switched to sweets. Carlotta began to tremble. Looking at the Duke, she asked, "Does such magic exist, and the royal family possesses it?" Archelaus explained that some emperors were intimidated by Asterial nobles, because those were much more powerful than them. Claire was listening, and Asiel continued to say something about cakes. The girl turned to her sister to support her conversation. Asiel noted with a happy expression that Claire liked sour desserts. Asiel continued to look with delight at the other sweets that were on the table. Claire was amazed. She didn't even pay attention to what kind of cake her sister offered her. The conversation of adults continued in the manor. Carlotta noted that the Duke did not serve her father. Arcel explained that it was because before her father cast his spell on him, he swore allegiance to Evan and named him emperor. Carlotta sighed heavily. She told Arcel that her father was killed. Therefore, he is no longer under his spell. The Duke replied that it was she who recited the spell, and it was she who still had magical power over him. Arcel said that his emperor is Evan, so he will serve him until his death, and he added that he is still happy. Carlotta asked why. After all, he had the power of a fermata in his hands, but he still remains the faithful dog of the emperor. The Duke explained that if it weren't for her spell and her magical power, Evan would never have agreed to pardon her. There was silence in the room. Claire understood why the emperor had forgiven her mother. Her mother is the chain that forever bound her father to the imperial will. The girl reflected on the fact that her parents had become closer thanks to a spell that backfired. Her mother is a sorceress who read spells, and her father is her chain. The truth was nauseatingly fake, in contrast to the pleasant taste of lemon cake. Carlotta looked into Arcel's eyes and said that she loved him. The Duke replied that he loved her too. Then she asked why his love makes her so unhappy. Carlotta looked down and said that when she says she loves him, it means that he is more than anything to her. And even if she will never see him again, she wants him to live happily. With sadness in her eyes, she added that she just didn't want to bother him anymore. She didn't have the right to. The Duke's expression became harsh, and he asked in a harsh voice, "Since when did she start thinking about others?" Carlotta is not sure what he means. Herzog said that he remembers everything, that on her wedding day she tried to commit suicide. She also said that she had accidentally lost her ability to do magic and could no longer regain it. And that's not all. When he said for the 5th time that she was his crush, she threatened to hang herself if he said it even once more. The Duke remarked that he had been married to her for 3 years, and not a single day had passed without an argument. When he says he loves her, it means he loves her whole, even with her selfishness and depression. He asked Carlotta if she really loved him, to treat him the same way he treated her. The way he loves her, with all her flaws and arrogance. Claire heard everything. She thought that their father wanted to return them to the life that was rightfully theirs. And the mother does not want to return to the fact that she loves him. She didn't want them to live in this snake's den. Sitting over the cake, the girl thought about what kind of love this is, when everyone stands his ground and refuses to give in. Carlotta asked the Duke where the girls were. He replied that they went for a walk. It seems they were in the garden. The Duke turned and went to the window. He looked out into the yard to see the girls, and then he saw something that surprised him. Through the open balcony door, he saw Claire on the street using her powers in the form of gusts of wind to amuse Asiel. The Duke told Carlotta that the girls were having fun. The girl's mother came to him and said it was good. Arcel returned to her, and she said that they would leave tomorrow. He asked where. Carlotta replied that she would go home to the village, that she would move to a place where he would not find her. She doesn't want to go back to the palace, let alone get her title back. Carlotta said she was grateful for what he had done for her, but he should get his name back on the list of founders. The woman added that she was sure Evan would make an exception for him. The Duke asked if it was really the best she could do for him. Carlotta replied that it wasn't something he would like, but it was really the best she could do. Then the Duke asked about the children. The woman replied that they had grown up without a father, and even worse, their mother was a great sinner. He may not protect them physically, but he will not be able to protect them from moral harm. The Duke remarked that in order to assure the whole world that she was his, he made a vow to the fermata. What a bitter irony, that he convinced everyone but not her. Carlotta was silent. The Duke said enough quarrels, enough separation. Does she want to stop it? Carlotta apologized. Herzog noted that her apology was arrogant, and he added that there is no need to apologize because he knows that she is not sorry at all. The woman asked what it means to be arrogant. Herzog explained that she probably thought she wished him well, and if she did, he would agree even to her pity. that then she will be with him, at least out of pity. Carlotta asked again for pity. She asked how he could say such a thing if he knew how much she was hurt and ashamed. After all, he saw it all with his own eyes. The Duke came closer to her and, looking into her eyes, said with a harsh look that if she was really ashamed, would she behave like this now? Carlotta looked at the Duke and replied that she did not know how she had lived with him for so many years. Arcel told Carlotta to be honest with herself, that she just wants to escape from the worst sin of her life. The woman wondered what he was talking about, and the Duke continued. He told her not to cover herself with girls, that she wants to escape from the uncomfortable truth, that she feels ashamed for loving him and is afraid to think what her late father will think of her. Carlotta was silent. She was amazed by such frankness. She felt embarrassed. Lowering her eyes, she said that he knows everything. Then she asked the Duke if he thought he understood her better than she did. The Duke smiled and said that she and the girls should go with him to the capital and live together. Carlotta sarcastically added that they were indeed the descendants of a tyrant, and accordingly, the emperor wanted to keep them under his control. Arcel said that when they return, he wants to officially enter the children into their family tree. Carlotta was surprised, and then she said that she didn't know if I should ask, but when he asked for her pardon from the emperor, whether he asked him to restore her to the title. Herzog explained that there was no reason to strip her of her title. If she was pitied and became a commoner, their children would have no right to inherit his name and title. He added that he would do everything possible to protect her and their daughters from all harm. If she tells him, he will swear to this Fermat. Carlotta asked him never to say that again. Arcel asked Carlotta to return to him. She sighed heavily and asked if she could take time to think. The Duke said yes, and she could stay as long as she wanted. Carlotta agreed and said that the girls would get to know him better at the same time. Also, if he wants to be a family, he must be more delicate. And she threatened that if she ever heard him telling the girls something they shouldn't know, she would make sure he wouldn't see them again. The Duke asked her to teach him, because in this he is a complete profane. Arcel asked, what do their children like? Claire was looking at the balcony of the estate where their parents were standing. She remembered the words that Arcel had said to her mother. What if she was really ashamed? Wouldn't she have behaved like that? These were icy words, under which passion and pain were hidden. How much pain was in his, it would seem to a cold voice. He tried to hide it, but his intentions were clear. Claire thought that with Eziel's help, she would interrupt their conversation. But it seems that this was not necessary. They stopped raging. Here, Eziel came up to Claire and asked where their mother and father were. Claire motioned her to the balcony of the estate and told her they were there. She also added that they are still talking. Eziel was amazed. She asked her sister if she heard them from here. The parents continued the conversation. The mother said that Eziel is a normal child. She likes beautiful dresses, sweets, books with fairy tales, and other things that are not so difficult to make her happy. The Duke asked about Claire. The mother thought. She said that Claire likes books, but not just any book, only books that give her knowledge. The father asked from which region, and the mother answered that from any. The girl is interested in everything she does not know. Carlotta said that when they go out for a walk, Eziel devotes all his time to flowers, while Claire is always fascinated by the sky and clouds. Claire was surprised. She always thought she was good at pretending to be silly in front of her mother. Eziel asked Claire what her parents were talking about. Claire thought and replied that they were talking about loving them. Eziel asked if that was true. Claire replied that she was, and they were discussing it now. Eziel thought for a moment, then answered with a happy smile that she loved Claire too. Claire thanked her for that, and Eziel said that what she is doing is wrong, that it is necessary to say, I love you too. Claire told her sister that she couldn't say that just thinking about it gave her goosebumps. Eziel laughed out loud. She said that if Claire keeps making excuses, she'll never be able to say what's on her mind. Sister told Claire not to worry about her saying it for her. Eziel said that she really likes Claire and is so happy that she is her twin. Then, taking Claire's hand, Eziel said that they would be fine because she knew what she was like at heart. Claire looked at her sister in silence, and Eziel asked her to promise something, that when Claire fell in love with someone, she would remember that no one but her sister could know her better. And she also asked to promise that she would tell this man that she loved him. Claire was shocked by her sister's words. She was silent for a moment and then said that she would promise. Eziel saw someone behind Claire. She smiled and ran towards the estate with the words, Mommy and Daddy. The parents of the girls left the estate and approached them. Esiel ran to meet them. Matinka asked if they were having fun here, and Esiel asked if they knew what Claire had done. Claire stood still. She thought about the family, and now also the father. Claire watched as her sister spoke animatedly to her parents, and they smiled back at her. She thought the Duke would make a wonderful father to Esiel. Then Claire saw the Duke looking at her and smiling very gently. The girl thought that she hoped he would be a good father to her, too. Her father seems to have spent his whole life preparing to be a good father. Dresses and toys, children's books, sparkling jewelry. He and his sister received gifts every day. Claire looked at the mountain of different gifts in the room. She thought it was getting out of hand. While Esiel was happy and could not contain her delight at the many gifts, Claire noted that the Duke had made the largest room in the manor her and Esiel's playroom. Claire noted that they were only 9 years old, so what else could he give them? And what was even more amazing was that the father was generous not only with gifts, but also generously gave them his time. He played with them for days. After all, he gave his mother time to think. Claire thought to herself that she was sure the Duke of Celsius had more important things to do than watch Esiel draw for hours. All week the Duke showed the girls that he was ready to take on the role of father, but Claire was not ready to accept her father, who appeared so suddenly in her life. Unlike Esiel, who accepted him immediately, she even started calling him Daddy. Reading a book, Claire watched as they sat at the table and the Duke helped Esiel draw. Claire couldn't understand how her sister could start calling him Daddy so quickly and easily. After all, she herself could not do that yet. But Claire noted that the Duke was very patient with her. He was not disappointed, despite the fact that she did not even have the courage to call him father. He did not impose the conversation on her, allowing her to gradually get used to him. Claire thought that being with her and Esiel made him very happy. It was strange to the girl that the Duke looked at her with love, like Esiel and his mother. Until now, only their green eyes had looked at her like that. Unconditional love. Claire never thought she would see the light of that love in eyes as purple as hers. The Duke looked at Claire, who was looking at him with a book in her hands, and asked if she had anything to bring. The girl thanked and said that it was not necessary. The Duke simply lit up with happiness. Claire blushed and looked down at the book. She also noted that he pays equal attention to her and Esiel. The girl noted that when the Duke saw that she was reading a book, he brought her even more interesting books. And when he saw that Esiel was very happy with the new doll, he bought her more the next day. For their sake, he is ready for anything. They had only recently seen each other for the first time, but he would like to fill the time of his absence and give them everything their hearts desire. This is the opinion the Duke conveyed to the girls through his actions. Matinka also could not fail to notice his efforts. Once she entered the room where the Duke was playing with his daughters and invited him to tea in the garden. Claire understood that after a week, her mother finally had the courage to answer the Duke. As a whole family, they came to the beautiful garden that was behind the estate. Esiel asked her dad if she and Claire could play there. The Duke allowed it, and Esiel grabbed Claire's hand and pulled her somewhere. Carlotta noted that he had become very friendly with their girls. Arcel smiled and said that it was true. Mother asked if he was able to get to know them better. The Duke replied that he still had a lot to learn about them. Carlotta told him not to downplay that he hadn't left them all week. She noted that he must be busy already, and the Duke replied that it would wait. He asked Carlotta how she was doing and whether she liked it here. The woman thought, and then looked at the girls who were happily playing with the flowers. She turned her gaze to Arcel and said that she would return with him to the capital, but on one condition. She will stay there for only 1 year. A warm spring breeze blew softly through the cold winter light. Carlotta looked at the face full of tenderness and kindness. She understood that he generously gave them his love and time. She asked herself what she should do with him. They sat in the gazebo in the garden and drank tea. Arcel asked why only a year. Carlotta, putting down a cup of tea, replied that it was enough to apologize and listen to the apology. She added that he wasn't the only one she hurt. When she returns, she will meet these people one by one. Carlotta said she would apologize, although they are not obliged to forgive her, but she actually repented of what she had done to them. Arcel said he understands her desire to apologize, but the only thing he doesn't understand is who she expects an apology from. Carlotta said she thinks Arcel remembers several names. These are the Pontiff and his cardinals, his aunt and the Duke of Sison. She wanted to see if they would apologize. The woman said that there is no need to pawn them. She would like to hear their true apologies. Arcel was angry. He slammed his fist on the table and said that if they had even an ounce of honor left, they wouldn't dare show themselves in front of her. Carlotta said she knew about it, but she was just as unscrupulous to some people. She explained that she will spend this year meeting up with everyone she hurt and apologizing. If someone has already died, he will apologize to their families. She doesn't just want to stop feeling guilty, but she really repented. The Duke sighed heavily and asked if perhaps he should go with her. Carlotta, pressing her finger to her lips, said no need. After all, she also did him a lot of harm. Just as Arcel was about to say something else, Carlotta stopped him. She said no need. She wants him to just take care of the girls, that he would teach them not to be like their mother. Casting her eyes down, Carlotta added that she did not think she had the right to return to the palace after all. That he did so much to get her pardoned, but you can't do anything about it. That he is just one of her victims, but if he wants her to come back with him, then she agrees. The woman said that someday she had to answer for her sins. She said she would apologize to people, but if they didn't do the same to her... Carlotta smiled and looked at Arcel and said that he already knew she was selfish, so she would stay with him even if they didn't like it. And she knows they won't like it. The Duke didn't even know how to answer that. And Carlotta said here are her plans for the coming year. She will ask people for forgiveness for her sins and see if they want to reciprocate. The woman added that she would entrust their girls to his care. Arcel said that he understood everything. Walking in the garden, Aziel noticed that there were beautiful flowers. When she saw the beautiful roses, she said that she wanted to give them to her mother, and whether they would boil them if they plucked them. Claire said that if they were scolded, she would take the blame. Aziel said there was no need to do that. Claire wondered why, because Aziel always cries when she is scolded, and she doesn't. Aziel said she knows Claire doesn't cry, but she also knows she doesn't like being picked on either, and Aziel plucked the flower herself. Claire looked at her sister in surprise, and Aziel added that she knew Claire didn't like it when she cried, and she does not like it when Claire is scolded, especially when she is not guilty of anything. Aziel took Claire's hand and suggested they walk together. The girls ran along the path through the garden with the plucked rose. Claire looked at her sister with the rose in her hands and smiled. The girls' parents finished the tea party. Rising from the table, the Duke said that he would send a letter to the Emperor, but that she was returning with him. The Emperor wanted to meet her in person before formally pardoning her. Carlotta noted that she had not seen him since childhood. He probably does not treat her well. Arcel said that this is not true, that when the Emperor was on the run, he lived under the alias of Sir Lorinal. The cup fell from the woman's hands. At that moment, the girls came up. They did not understand what happened to the mother. The Duke approached Carlotta and asked if she was all right, and she turned pale, asked in a trembling voice, "Is this man really Evan?" Herzog replied that it was. Carlotta plunged into despair. She told him to forget about her plan for the year, and she added that she could be thrown into prison for insulting a person of royal blood if she only entered Jerem. Aziel ran up to her parents and curiously began to ask her mother what a person of royal blood was, whether they would go to the capital, what they would do there, and what the plan was for the year. Claire watched as her sister questioned her parents endlessly, and then she noticed a rose on the ground that Aziel had dropped. She picked her up and thought it looked like they were going to live in Jerem for 1 year.